The night sky above the colony city of New Haven was dark and wild. Thick clouds moved like giant waves, covering the stars, and lightning flashed again and again. The wind roared through empty streets, carrying dust and the smell of rain. It was one of the worst storms in many years on Eris 3, the planet where humans had started their new life after leaving Earth long ago. Inside Starlight Hospital, everything was silent except for the sound of the storm outside and the soft beeping of machines. The night shift had begun hours ago. Most people were asleep, but Nurse Mira was still awake, working carefully as always. She was known by everyone for her kind heart and calm face. She had worked in this hospital for more than 7 years and had seen many strange things, but tonight would be different. Tonight something would happen that she would never forget. Mira walked through the newborn ward, checking every baby one by one. She smiled when one of them moved its tiny hand. The light in the room flickered for a moment as thunder shook the sky. She sighed and looked at the dark windows. "I hope the power stays," she whispered softly. In the corridor, the security lights glowed faint blue. The hospital was half empty during night shifts. Only a few doctors and nurses were awake. Mira liked nights like this and quiet and peaceful, but the sound of thunder made her uneasy. Something in the air felt strange. Suddenly, she heard a noise. It came from the main door, a loud metallic thud followed by the faint sound of claws scratching against the floor. Mira froze. The sound came again, this time closer. Her heart began to beat faster. "Is someone there?" she called, stepping toward the main entrance. The glass doors were automatic and usually opened only when someone approached. Now they were half open, shaking in the strong wind. Rain blew in through the gap. Lightning flashed across the sky. And for a moment, Mira saw a shape outside. It was low to the ground, moving slowly. It was not a person. It looked like an animal. She took a step closer and the doors slid open completely. A cold gust of wind hit her face and rain splashed on the floor. In the doorway stood a dog, but not a normal dog. Its fur was made of thin metal plates, scratched and covered with mud. Its eyes glowed faint blue and its legs moved stiffly, like a machine running out of power. The robotic dog dragged something behind it, a small silver blanket. It moved weakly, its paws slipping on the wet tiles. Mira's eyes widened when she saw what was inside the blanket. It was a baby. "Dear heavens," she whispered and ran forward. She knelt beside the dog and gently pulled the blanket open. The baby was pale, not crying, barely breathing. Its tiny chest moved up and down slowly, almost too weak to notice. "Help," Mira shouted. "Someone call Dr. Lee. Emergency in the main hall." The robotic dog collapsed on the floor beside her, water dripping from its body. Its head turned slowly toward the baby, as if making sure the child was safe. Its eyes blinked faintly, and a soft beeping sound came from inside its chest. 2 doctors came running. "What happened?" one asked. "I don't know," Mira said quickly. "This robot dog brought the baby in. It's freezing and not breathing properly. We need to get it to the ward now." They lifted the baby carefully and rushed toward the emergency room. Mira followed, her hands shaking. She looked back once. The robotic dog had not moved. It lay still on the floor, covered in mud and rainwater. Inside the emergency room, machines came to life. The doctors worked fast, wrapping the baby in warm sheets, checking its oxygen level and heartbeat. Mira stood beside them, helping in every way she could. The baby's skin had strange marks, soft blue lines that glowed faintly under the light. It didn't look like normal burns, and Mira had never seen anything like it. After some tense minutes, the monitor beeped steadily. The baby's breathing improved. Mira let out a long breath she didn't realize she was holding. The baby was alive. She smiled weakly and looked at the small face. The child looked peaceful now, almost glowing in the warm light. Dr. Lee shook his head in disbelief. "This baby? Where did it come from?" Mira replied, "The dog brought it. A robotic dog, not any kind I've seen before." The doctor frowned. "A robot dog? Are you sure?" "Yes," Mira said softly. It dragged the baby through the storm. Its body was damaged, but it didn't stop until it reached the door. The doctor sighed and said, "We'll keep the child here for observation. You go and see that machine. Maybe it has an identification chip." Mira nodded and went back to the hall. The rain still hit the glass doors and water spread across the floor. The robotic dog was lying there silently. Its body was full of scratches and sparks came from one of its legs. Mira crouched down beside it. "Hey," she whispered. "You saved that baby, didn't you?" The dog didn't move, but when she touched its head gently, its eyes blinked once. It made a soft sound, almost like a whimper. "Don't worry," she said kindly. "You did well. You're safe now." A security guard came with a scanner. They scanned the dog's chip, but the screen showed only empty data. No owner, no registration, nothing. Then the guard pointed at a small plate on its neck. The plate had a single line written on it, Project ARC, RX-7. Mira read it slowly. "Project ARC?" she repeated. "What is that?" The guard shrugged. "Old government stuff, maybe." "I've never heard of it." She looked at the robotic dog again. Its eyes were still dimly glowing, fixed on the direction of the emergency room. Even in its broken state, it seemed alive. When Mira went back to the ward, the baby was sleeping quietly. Dr. Lee said the child would recover, though it needed care and testing. He looked thoughtful and added, "Those blue marks on the skin, they don't look normal. They might be from radiation." "Radiation?" Mira asked, surprised. "But the outer ruins are far from here. No one can survive there." Dr. Lee nodded slowly. "No one human, maybe." Mira stood beside the bed and looked at the baby's small hand. It was warm now. She smiled softly. "Whatever you are, you're safe here," she whispered. Later, as she sat near the baby's bed, she heard the faint sound of metal steps again. She turned. The robotic dog was standing in the doorway. Somehow it had dragged itself there, leaving a trail of water behind. Mira gasped. "You should rest," she said softly. The dog looked at the baby for a long moment. Then a small light came from its head, a short hologram, blurry and shaking. Mira saw a woman's face appear in the light, her voice breaking through static. "Protect him, RX-7. Take him to safety." The image vanished. The dog lowered its head and went still again. Mira sat frozen, heart heavy with emotion. Whoever that woman was, she had trusted this robotic dog to save the child. And it did. As the storm continued to rage outside, Mira looked at the baby and the silent machine and felt something deep inside her heart. This was not just a rescue. It was a message. Even in a world ruled by machines, human love still survived, in the heart of a nurse and even in the soul of a robotic dog. Morning came slowly to New Haven after the long night storm. The air outside was calm again, but the city still looked gray and wet. Water dripped from the roofs and the streets were quiet except for a few service drones cleaning the mess left by the wind. Inside Starlight Hospital, the lights flickered back to normal. The power grid was stable again. The doctors and nurses who had been working through the storm were tired, but none of them could stop thinking about what had happened the night before, about the strange robotic dog and the baby it had brought. Nurse Mira hadn't slept. She stayed in the neonatal room beside the baby. The child was breathing softly with a small band around its wrist that monitored heartbeat and temperature. The skin still had faint blue lines that glowed under the medical light. It looked almost like tiny veins filled with light. The robotic dog, RX-7, was kept in the hospital's engineering lab for safety. Technicians were trying to check its systems and see if it carried any danger. But Mira felt something different about it, not danger, but purpose. Dr. Lee came into the room, rubbing his eyes. "You're still here, Mira. You need rest." "I couldn't leave," she replied softly. "I keep thinking about that dog. It came through the storm for this child. It must have traveled far." Dr. Lee nodded. "Yes, the baby's body has some signs of radiation exposure. That means it came from the outer ruins. No one has lived there for years." "Then how did they survive?" Mira asked quietly. "That's what we need to find out," the doctor said. "We're running DNA tests now, and the dog system might tell us something too." He left soon after, and Mira sat again beside the baby. She watched it move a little in its sleep. The small face looked peaceful now, and for the first time she smiled. "You're strong, little one," she whispered, "and you had a good friend watching over you." Later that day, Mira went to the engineering lab. Inside, 2 young technicians were working on RX-7. One of them, Dan, looked up as she entered. "Oh, Nurse Mira," he said politely. "You're the one who found this unit, right?" "Yes," she said. "How is it?" Dan scratched his head. "Hard to say. This machine is very advanced. Its structure isn't like any model we know. It's not registered in any database. Even its AI core is unique." Mira looked at the dog's body. It was lying on a metal table, still covered in scratches. Its eyes were dim but not completely dark. "Can you fix it?" she asked. "I can try," Dan said. but its memory core is locked by a security code. I can't open it without proper authorization. What if it wakes up? Mira asked softly. Dan shrugged. Then we'll know if it's friendly or not. Mira smiled faintly. It's friendly. It saved a child's life. Dan gave her a surprised look. A machine showing loyalty like that? That's not in its basic code. Maybe there's something more to it. He pressed a few buttons and the screen beside the table showed a line of data. The words Project Arc RX-7 appeared again. What's Project Arc? Mira asked. Dan frowned. I'm not sure, but the name sounds old. Maybe something from the early days of the colony. Mira's eyes rested on the dog again. Can you try to activate it? Maybe it can tell us. Dan nodded and connected a small power cable to RX-7's chest. The lights on its side blinked once, then again. Slowly, the robot's head turned and its eyes glowed faint blue. Mira stepped closer. Hello, RX-7, she said gently. The dog looked at her, then scanned the room. For a moment, it made a low sound like a sigh. Its eyes flickered as if it recognized her voice. RX-7, Mira said softly. You brought a baby here last night. Can you understand me? The dog's chest light blinked twice, then projected a small hologram in the air. The image was blurry at first, then cleared. Mira saw a burning settlement. Metal buildings were collapsing, people running in panic. She heard a woman's voice shouting through static. Protect him, RX-7. Take him to safety! Then the image ended and the light faded. Mira's eyes filled with tears. It really was protecting the child, she whispered. Dan stared at the hologram, amazed. That's real emotion programming. This isn't just a machine. It followed a command that came from care, not calculation. RX-7 lowered its head and made a soft sound, almost like a whine. Mira reached out and touched its metal head carefully. You did what she asked. You saved him. The dog blinked again as if it understood. That evening, Mira sat in the hospital garden for a short break. The rain had stopped and the air smelled fresh. She looked up at the 2 moons above Eris-3, feeling the weight of what she had learned. Humans had left Earth because of pollution and war. They had built cities on other planets, but in doing so, they had also lost many things: kindness, trust, and the will to protect the weak. Now this one small act by a machine had reminded her what it meant to care. She thought about the name Project Arc. An ark meant a vessel of hope, a way to carry life when the world was dying. Maybe this project had tried to save something precious long ago. She decided to find out the truth. The next day, Mira visited the hospital archives with Dan's help. The room was old, filled with blinking terminals and shelves of data chips. They searched for Project Arc in the system. At first, nothing appeared. Then Dan found a hidden file under the government medical research section. This might be it, he said. They opened it. The file showed old images and short notes. It spoke of a secret plan to create humans who could survive in extreme conditions: radiation, heat, and disease. The scientists had tried to make adapting humans who could rebuild life on dangerous worlds. But the project had been stopped after an explosion destroyed the main facility. The record ended with a line: all subjects presumed lost. Remaining guardians ordered to protect surviving specimens at all cost. Mira stared at the words. Guardians! That means RX-7, Dan nodded slowly. And the baby must be one of those subjects. A child made to survive where normal humans can't. Mira felt a chill. So this baby was left behind after the explosion, and RX-7 protected him all these years? Looks like it, Dan said quietly. It must have kept him alive until it found this hospital. Mira thought of the woman's voice in the hologram. Maybe she was the scientist who created the baby, or maybe she was the baby's mother. Whoever she was, she had trusted a machine with her most precious treasure. She turned to Dan. We can't tell the Central Authority yet. They might take the baby away for experiments. Dan looked nervous. That would be illegal, Mira. I don't care, she said firmly. That baby deserves a chance to live a normal life, just like any other child. Dan looked into her eyes and then nodded. All right, we'll keep this between us. That night, Mira returned to the baby's room. RX-7 was sitting near the crib, its eyes glowing softly. It had refused to stay in the lab. Somehow it always found its way back to the child. Mira smiled. You really are a protector, aren't you? The dog blinked once, then looked at the baby, who was now awake. The child stretched its hand, touching RX-7's metal paw. A faint blue light passed between them, and the baby giggled softly. Mira watched the scene with tears in her eyes. Maybe, she whispered, you two were never meant to destroy the world. Maybe you were meant to save it. As the night grew quiet, the robotic dog lay beside the crib, guarding the child as if nothing else in the world mattered. And in that moment, Mira knew the mystery of RX-7 was not just about machines or science. It was about something deeper. It was about the human heart, something even metal could learn to carry. 3 days had passed since the storm. The city of New Haven was bright again, but inside Starlight Hospital the air still carried quiet tension. Everyone in the building had heard whispers about the strange robotic dog and the mysterious baby it brought through the storm. Nurse Mira had not stopped thinking about what she and Dan had discovered, the secret government project called Project Ark. The old records were short and hidden, yet what little they read was enough to shake her heart. She walked into the baby's room early that morning. Soft golden light came through the window. The child was awake, lying calmly in the crib. The blue glow in its skin had faded a little, but in the sunlight it shimmered faintly, like water under glass. "Good morning, little one," she said with a smile. The baby moved its small hands and made a happy sound. RX-7 sat beside the crib, silent but watchful. Its metal body had been cleaned and partly repaired by Dan. The deep scratches were still there, reminders of what it had gone through. "You don't sleep much either, do you?" Mira said kindly to the dog. RX-7 blinked, the faint blue light of its eyes reflecting on the wall. Later that day, Mira met Dan again in the engineering section. He looked tired but excited. "I checked more hidden files," he said. "I think I found something important about Project Ark." "What is it?" she asked quickly. He opened a small screen on his tablet. It showed a map of the outer ruins, the place humans once used as a science zone before radiation spread. "This was the Ark facility," he said, pointing to a marked spot. "According to this file, the project wasn't about weapons. It was about survival." "Survival?" Mira repeated. "Yes," Dan said. "Long ago, before humans left Earth, scientists wanted to make people who could survive in any condition. Stronger lungs, faster healing, resistance to radiation. A way to keep humanity alive even if the world died." Mira's eyes widened. "So that baby?" Dan nodded slowly. "The baby is one of them. Maybe the last one. And RX-7 was built to protect it." Mira looked down, thinking deeply. The idea was both wonderful and sad. They tried to make perfect humans, and then the project was destroyed. But somehow this one survived, Dan sighed. "Yes, the explosion ended everything. The files say only one infant was unaccounted for. That must be him." Mira felt a strong emotion rise inside her. "Then we can't let anyone take him. He's not just a child, he's a piece of our future." Dan looked worried. "You know what the Central Authority will do if they find out. They'll call him property, not a person." "I know," Mira said firmly. "That's why we keep him safe." The next few days were calm. The baby grew stronger each day, feeding well and sleeping peacefully. Mira spent most of her time with him, singing small lullabies and talking softly. RX-7 never left the room. When the baby cried, the robot sensors reacted instantly. It played a soft hum that calmed the child. Other nurses began to notice. "That machine acts like a parent," one of them whispered. Mira smiled when she heard it. "Maybe it learned from someone who loved deeply," she said. One afternoon, Dr. Lee came to visit. He stood beside the crib and looked at the baby's glowing veins. "It's strange," he said slowly. "His cells heal faster than any human I've seen, and his temperature changes to match the room. That's not normal." Mira stayed silent. She didn't want to tell him too much yet. Dr. Lee sighed. "Mira, if the Central Authority asks, we'll have to give them all medical data." "You know the rules." "I know," she answered. "But can we wait a little longer? The baby is still weak." Dr. Lee looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, a few more days." When he left, Mira felt both relief and fear. Every hour that passed brought the risk of discovery. That night, something unexpected happened. Mira was reviewing patient charts when the light suddenly dimmed. The hospital alarm gave a soft warning beep. "What now?" she muttered, stepping into the hall. RX-7 stood in front of the baby's room, its sensors glowing brighter than usual. A low hum came from its chest. "RX-7, what's wrong?" she asked. The dog turned toward her and projected another hologram on the wall. The image was clearer this time. a laboratory filled with people in white suits. They were working around a row of pods that looked like eggs of glass. Inside each pod was a child floating in light. A voice echoed in the room. Calm and proud. Project ARC, adaptive resilient kin, designed to carry human DNA into the future. Then the image changed to chaos, an explosion, alarms, and fire. The same woman's voice shouted again, "Take him, RX-7! Save him. Don't let the project die." The vision ended, leaving the room silent. Mira stood frozen. The pieces finally connected in her mind. ARC wasn't just a name. It stood for the future of humanity itself. These children were meant to carry hope through destruction. She knelt beside RX-7 and whispered, "You kept that promise. You carried humanity's hope all this way." RX-7 blinked once, its mechanical tail moving slightly as if it understood her gratitude. The next morning, Mira and Dan met secretly in the small staff cafeteria. Dan looked around before speaking. "Mira, the authority has sent a message. They want to inspect all hospital data from the last 72 hours. Mira's face turned pale. "That means they know something unusual happened?" "Yes," he said. "We need to hide the baby's file in RX-7's data before they arrive." "Can you do it?" she asked quickly. Dan nodded. "I'll lock the system under maintenance code. It will look like the records are being repaired." Mira touched his arm. "Thank you, Dan, you're a good man." He smiled slightly. "I'm just doing what's right." That afternoon, while Dan worked on the data, Mira sat by the baby again. The child was awake, eyes open wide. For a moment she saw something strange in his gaze. The reflection of the room, the light, and something beyond it like stars hidden inside his pupils. "You really are different," she whispered. "Maybe you are the bridge between what we were and what we can become." The baby reached toward her hand, and when she touched his small fingers, she felt a tiny electric spark. Warm, harmless, but full of life. RX-7 made a soft tone beside her, as if approving the connection. Later that night, Mira walked through the quiet corridor. She carried a small notebook in which she had written everything she learned about Project ARC. She knew she might have to move the baby if the authority came sooner than expected. As she turned a corner, she met Dr. Lee again. He looked serious. "Mira, we need to talk." Her heart sank. "What happened?" "The Central Authority will arrive tomorrow morning," he said quietly. "They're coming for the baby." Mira's hands trembled slightly. "We can't let them take him, Doctor. They'll turn him into an experiment." Dr. Lee sighed. "I know what they might do, but the order is official. I can't stop them." Mira looked into his eyes and said softly, "Then I will." When she returned to the baby's room, RX-7 lifted its head. Mira looked at it and said, "They're coming for him. We have to leave." The robot's eyes glowed brighter as if it understood. It stood up slowly, metal joints clicking. Mira packed the baby's blanket and a small medical kit. Her hands shook, but her mind was clear. "We'll take him to the ruins," she whispered. "That's where he belongs. Maybe there's still something there." RX-7 barked once. A quiet, mechanical sound filled with determination. As Mira held the baby close, she looked back at the hospital one last time. The clean walls and bright lights had always felt safe, but now they felt like a cage. She whispered to the sleeping child, "We're going home." And as the night wind began to rise again, Nurse Mira, RX-7, and the small baby slipped quietly out of Starlight Hospital, walking toward the unknown shadows of the outer ruins, where the truth of Project ARC was waiting to be revealed. The hospital became quiet again after the night of chaos. The baby was safe now, resting in the nursery. The small creature who had brought him, the loyal dog, lay on a blanket near the nurse station. The doctors had treated the dog's injured paw, and though it limped a little, it looked peaceful. Everyone in the hospital admired it, but the mystery was still unsolved. Nurse Mira sat by the window early in the morning holding a cup of tea. Her thoughts were full of questions. Where did this dog come from? Whose baby was that? How did it know where to go? Every time she looked at the dog, she felt a strange connection, like the dog wanted to say something but could not speak. Dr. Tom joined her. "We need to find out where the baby came from," he said quietly. "I've already asked the police to start checking missing child reports." Mira nodded. "And the dog? It seems it won't leave the baby's side. It even growled at the cleaner who tried to move it from the nursery door." Tom smiled slightly. That dog has a bigger heart than most people." As they talked, the dog slowly stood and walked toward the nursery. It sat outside the glass window and watched the baby inside, wagging its tail slowly. The sight touched everyone who saw it. Even the security guard, who usually stayed strict, whispered, "It's like the dog is guarding an angel." Hours passed. The baby woke up and began to cry softly. Mira rushed in to comfort him. The dog also stood and began to whine as if feeling the baby's pain. Mira gently held the baby, whispering, "You're safe now, little one. You have a guardian watching over you." Later that day, Officer Daniel arrived. He carried a file full of reports. "We might have found something," he said. He opened the folder and spread some pictures on the table. One photo showed a woman with kind eyes holding a small baby. Another showed a man standing beside her, smiling proudly. "This couple lived near the old railway station," Daniel explained. "Their house was destroyed in a small fire 2 nights ago. Neighbors said they tried to escape with their baby, but they never made it out." Mira covered her mouth. "Oh no, are you saying—" Daniel nodded sadly. "They didn't survive. But the neighbors also mentioned they had a dog, a brown one named Max." Tom looked toward the resting dog near the door. "That's him. That's the dog." Everyone fell silent. It was heartbreaking to imagine what the dog had gone through, losing its family, surviving the fire, and still finding the strength to carry the baby to safety. Mira felt tears form in her eyes. "So the baby is theirs. Max must have rescued him from the fire." Daniel nodded. "It's possible. We found a small path from the burned house leading toward the town. The dog might have followed that route to reach here." Tom said softly, "That means Max walked for miles carrying the baby all the way." The room went quiet again. They all turned to look at Max, who was now lying down, his eyes half closed but calm. Mira whispered, "He's a hero." The next day, the hospital decided to take a small photo of Max and the baby together for the record. The picture showed the dog sitting beside the crib, his eyes gentle and full of love. That picture later became a symbol of hope in the hospital, a reminder of how love could exist even beyond species. Still, Mira couldn't stop thinking about the mystery of how Max had managed such a long journey. She went to the police station the next morning to visit the area where the fire had happened. The place was quiet and covered in ash. Among the burned walls, she found a half-melted nameplate that read, "Lena and Omar." Inside, she saw some broken furniture, a few toys, and an empty feeding bottle. Her eyes filled with tears. She whispered softly, "They must have loved their baby so much." When she turned to leave, she noticed something in the corner, a small path leading through the forest behind the house. The ground was full of paw prints and marks of something being dragged. It was clear now. Max had carried the baby through that path step by step, through mud, rain, and darkness. Mira followed the trail a little farther. She imagined the scene, the fire burning, smoke filling the sky, the dog running through the woods with the baby in its mouth, carefully avoiding any harm. The thought made her heart ache. She returned to the hospital and told Tom what she had seen. "It's amazing," she said. "That dog didn't just save the baby. It never gave up, even when everything around it was gone." Tom smiled. Sometimes animals understand love better than humans. Days turned into a week. The baby became healthier and stronger. Max always stayed near him, sleeping by the crib or walking beside Mira when she carried the child. Everyone in the hospital had grown attached to the pair. One afternoon, a couple came to visit. They were relatives of the baby's mother. When they saw the child, they began to cry with relief. The baby had found his family again, but when they prepared to take him home, Max became restless. He barked and followed them to the door, as if afraid to lose the baby. The relatives looked at the loyal animal with kindness. "He should come with us," one of them said. "He's part of the family now." Mira smiled through her tears. "He deserves that." As the family prepared to leave, Max jumped into the car beside the baby, tail wagging happily. Before they drove away, the dog turned back to look at Mira and Tom as if saying goodbye. Mira waved and whispered, "Thank you, Max. You taught us what real love means." The car disappeared down the road, and the hospital felt a little emptier without them. But everyone who had witnessed the event carried the story in their hearts. The story of a brave dog who crossed fire and darkness to save a child. That night, Mira stood by the same window where everything had begun. The city lights shimmered in the distance. She thought about how sometimes heroes come in unexpected forms, not wearing uniforms, but walking on four paws guided only by love. She whispered softly, "The world needs more hearts like his." The wind outside grew gentle, and in that peaceful silence it felt like Max's spirit was still there, guarding, loving, and reminding everyone that kindness knows no limits. The sun rose slowly over New Haven, spilling golden light across the hospital's tall windows. Inside Starlight Hospital, Nurse Mira walked through the quiet hallways, her mind full of thoughts about the past week. She had seen something extraordinary, a small baby saved by a brave robotic dog. She had watched love and loyalty rise above fear, fire, and darkness. The baby had grown stronger each day. His tiny hands now grabbed the edges of his crib, and his bright eyes followed Mira wherever she went. Mira had given him a simple name, Hope, for that was exactly what he had brought to everyone who had seen his journey. RX-7, the robotic dog, had also recovered from the injuries it had sustained. The engineers had repaired its joints and cleaned its metal body. Its eyes glowed softly, and the sensors inside it seemed to respond faster than ever. Mira often wondered if the machine could understand the meaning of family, the meaning of love. She thought it could. One morning, Mira and Dan went to the hospital garden with Hope and RX-7. The air was fresh, the grass bright green, and the small fountains sparkled in the sunlight. Hope sat on a blanket giggling as he watched RX-7 playfully chase its tail. The robot's movements were gentle, almost human in rhythm, and the baby reached out, touching its metallic paw. Mira smiled as she watched them. "You two are inseparable," she said softly. "You saved each other in more ways than one." Dan nodded. "It's amazing to see. RX-7 risked everything for Hope, and Hope's spirit seems to have made the dog stronger too." Mira knelt beside Hope, brushing his soft hair. "You know," she said, "humans sometimes forget what love really is. But you and RX-7 have reminded me." Hope laughed, the small sound echoing in the peaceful garden. Mira's heart swelled with hope, but the calm did not last long. A message arrived from the Central Authority, the same government organization that had monitored the colony for decades. They demanded the baby's records and wanted RX-7 examined. The hospital administrators were nervous, unsure how to handle the situation. Mira clenched her fists. "We can't let them take Hope," she whispered to Dan. "They won't understand what he is. They'll only see a project, not a child." Dan looked determined. "Then we must act quickly. Hope deserves a chance to live like any other child." That evening they gathered supplies. RX-7 seemed to understand the plan, standing alert and wagging its mechanical tail in approval. Mira wrapped Hope carefully in a warm blanket, making sure he was comfortable. She whispered to him softly, "We're going on a little journey, little one. You're safe with us." RX-7 stepped forward, nudging the blanket gently with its nose. Mira smiled. "Thank you, RX-7. I don't know what we would do without you." Together they left the hospital quietly, moving through back corridors and empty streets. Mira carried Hope while Dan followed with tools and supplies. RX-7 walked ahead, scanning the path and guarding them from any danger. The journey was not easy. They traveled through the old parts of New Haven, where abandoned buildings and broken streets created shadows and obstacles. RX-7 led them through hidden alleys and empty tunnels, always alert to any signs of the authorities' patrols. At one point, a group of drones appeared, scanning for anomalies. RX-7 growled, a mechanical yet strong and clear warning. The drones hovered for a moment, then moved on. Mira felt a wave of relief and whispered, "Good work. RX-7, you're incredible." Finally, after hours of careful movement, they reached the outskirts of the outer ruins, the place where Project Ark had first begun. Mira looked at the empty, crumbling buildings bathed in the pale moonlight. The ruins were quiet, but the feeling in the air was powerful, like the ghosts of past efforts. Failures and dreams were still there. RX-7 led them to a hidden room, one Mira had discovered in her research. Inside there were old storage pods, some cracked and dusty. Only one remained intact, glowing faintly. Mira approached it carefully, noticing symbols of Project Ark etched into the walls. "This is where it all started," Dan whispered. "This is where humanity tried to protect its future." Mira held Hope close, feeling the baby's warmth and life. She realized that RX-7 had not just carried a child. It had carried the hope of an entire human legacy. They settled in the ruins, creating a small safe space for Hope. RX-7 stayed beside him, silent and alert. Mira sat down and looked around. The walls bore messages from the scientists who had worked on Project Ark. One read, "To save humankind, we must trust love more than science." Mira's eyes filled with tears. "They understood something important," she whispered. "Even back then, they knew that caring, protecting, and loving is what keeps humans alive." RX-7's eyes blinked once, soft and steady, as if agreeing. Mira reached out and gently touched its head. "You did what they could not," she said softly. "You carried hope into the world." The next morning, Mira and Dan prepared to record everything they had learned. They wanted the story to live, the story of a machine that could understand love, and a child who represented the future of humanity. Hope crawled on the soft blanket, his laughter filling the room. RX-7 followed, gently nudging him to prevent him from falling. Mira laughed, feeling a warmth that she had not felt in years. "This is what it's about," she said. "Protecting life no matter the cost. Caring for each other, even when it's hard. That is what makes humans extraordinary." Dan nodded. "It's true. We often forget, but now we have proof. Humanity can rise because love and loyalty can exist anywhere, even in a machine." Months passed. Hope grew stronger every day. Mira, Dan, and RX-7 watched him learn to walk, then run, and finally laugh freely in the sun. RX-7 became his constant companion, teaching him small lessons, guiding him, and protecting him. The story of Max, the dog who had first saved him, became legend in New Haven. Children in the colony spoke about him with awe, saying that even a machine could have a heart. Adults were inspired to think about what it truly meant to care, and the hospital staff often told the story to new nurses as a reminder of dedication and love. Finally, one bright morning, Mira and Dan held a small ceremony in the ruins. They placed a simple marker near RX-7, who sat silently beside it. The marker read, "A friend of humanity, protector of hope." Mira knelt beside it and whispered, "You saved a life, RX-7, and in doing so, you reminded us all what it means to be human." RX-7's eyes glowed softly, reflecting the sunlight. Hope, now a strong and happy child, ran to him, hugging his metallic paw. The dog's sensors adjusted, making a gentle whirring sound like a soft laugh. Years later, Hope grew into a kind, intelligent young boy. Mira often watched him play with other children in the colony, his laughter echoing through the streets. RX-7 had become more than a protector. He was a teacher, a guide, and a friend to everyone who knew the story. The ruins were restored into a memorial, with a statue of a dog holding a baby in its paws. Engraved at the base were the words, "Because humanity still deserves to be saved." Mira stood before the statue one morning, watching the sunlight touch the metal and stone. She felt a deep sense of peace. Humanity had faced storms, destruction and danger, but in the end, the courage of a single machine and the life of a single child had reminded them all that hope, love, and care were stronger than fear or darkness. And as the wind whispered through the streets of New Haven, she knew the story would live forever, not just as a tale of survival, but as proof that humanity's heart, its loyalty, and its compassion could rise above anything. RX-7 sat beside her, watching hope run ahead. Mira reached out and touched his head once more. "Thank you," she said softly. "For saving him, and for saving all of us in the process." The dog blinked, its blue eyes shining bright, full of warmth, pride, and something that seemed almost human. The understanding that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can change the world. Hope laughed again, running into the sunlight with RX-7 by his side, and Mira knew deep in her heart that this was only the beginning. The world had been reminded that humanity was worth protecting, and that even in a dark world, love could guide the way.